next live guest now this morning. We have Dave with us from ODW Logistics, going to get into a little bit about what's going on over at ODW. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are we?
Doing great, sir. How are you this morning?
I cannot complain.
Dave, it looks like you've got a little bit of activity going on behind you at the office right now. Tell us a little bit about ODW. Where are you guys at since the last time that we spoke just about a month ago?
Well, we're at the same places, but there's a lot of things changing. So, we were all intrigued with Craig's article about 3 weeks ago that threw the bloodbath out there, and currently we're in the midst, along with a lot of other companies out there, trying to figure out what that means for our futures here. So, a lot of exciting things going on, and we're gonna keep figuring our way through things here.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I just came back from the TIA conference in San Diego, and I think everybody's kind of question was, what is the brokerage space thinking about this bloodbath? How is it happening? And it seemed like out there wasn't really this like overarching concern, but there was more of kind of this underlying tinge of like changes are coming. It's like the wind of change was like blowing into the conference, right? But people weren't really concerned about it just quite yet. Let's talk a little bit about your guys' perspective. What are you seeing about this downturn in the market? Are you starting to change up some expectations, some client expectations? Tell us about it.
Look, we've seen 18 to 24 months now of we hit the rock bottom and we've done nothing but rise up the mountain since, right? So obviously, I think we've hit the peak of the mountain. Over the last 3 weeks, we've seen some of Craig's prophecies ring true that the volume is dropping. At ODW, we're really trying to figure out what does that mean, because as we look at our carrier capacity, we are seeing more availability of equipment, more availability of trucks, easier to cover loads, more productive conversations with your medium and larger size carriers that are more interested potentially than they had been in what types of activities we've got going on. So from that perspective, it's all upside. We are looking strategically, kind of from a boardroom executive perspective at, what could this mean long term? I saw this morning that we hit record inflations again. I think we're over 8.5. What does that mean? So I think that we've kind of started to go through some activities to look at, how do we get back to the roots? How do we get back to focusing on process improvement, focusing on driver retention, carrier building? For 24 months, so many of us were chasing our tails and trying to figure out what ends up and entering into new opportunities and trying to service shippers, keep carriers happy. And potentially, now's a bit of a calm before the next storm to figure out where do we go next here. And one thing I'll add, we're also trying to identify what industry is really being hit. As we look through our customer base, we've spent the first couple of days this week on customer reviews and shipper by shipper from January and February up to March, we're in a lucky position. We're not seeing any downturn in volume from our shipper community. So we're really trying. That said, we do see it on the carrier side. So we're trying to understand what's driving the market out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of new capacity that came on, according to the numbers on the operating authorities that came on in recent months with record high numbers, that type of thing. And you mentioned of the next storm that is coming down there, that is coming down the pike, right? And there always will be one. But the severity of that storm, as we've spoken about here in numerous occasions, is dependent on our reaction to it right now. What should shippers really be looking for and be doing? How should we be playing this loosening of capacity right now?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like I said earlier, it does get back to the roots. It's been a long time as a 3PL, right? traditional carrier is going to look to work directly with the shipper as much as possible. And obviously there's been an infusion of technology and value that's been created from a 3PL perspective that has intrigued the shipper community, and they've seen that continued value. However, I really think that driving those carrier relationships now at a time where they are listening is very impactful. For example, for us, we've talked over the last couple of months about our optimization program, our consolidation program. Frankly, for the last 3 or 4 months, it's been very difficult to convince carriers to do 2-stop, 3-stop, 4-stop delivery loads, or even making 2 pickups instead of us collecting freight at our local terminals, having carriers go out and make those runs. Those are things we had been doing prior to the pandemic and at the beginning of the pandemic, and those carriers were not as interested in that over the last several months. With the slight dip here, we're having more of those conversations, and those carriers are opening up to those types of ideas. One other thing that I would add is there's been an immense amount of consideration given to how do you keep drivers happy, how do you keep carriers happy, what are things that you can do from a shipping perspective to better take care of those guys. And potentially we're on the beginning of a downslope. Potentially it's going to be a tumble. Either way, long term, we're going to need those drivers. We're going to need those carriers. So I think it's very critical that we not look short term and try to take advantage of the downturn in the economy, the additional capacity out there, and continue to take care of your carriers out there.
Dave, as kind of the power in the industry falls back into the hands of the shippers right now, do you think that there's more of an opportunity now for shippers to stop looking at 3PLs as the true source for freight management and now really look at them as a space for utilization of relationship management with those carriers, maybe talking less about kind of finding this capacity, finding the space, and more about, hey, take care of my guys. That way I'm not losing out as I truly hold the power now as a shipper.
100%. I think that it's always a balancing act, right? I mean, I've been in the industry for 20 years now, and you've got times where it's a carrier friendly environment. You've got times where it's a shipper friendly environment, and right now we're kind of at that inflex point. I do see. Yeah, you were just out at the TI conference. I didn't make it out myself, but one of our executives here did have a chance to be out there, and there's an immense amount of technology. The old days of big, robust TMS companies that kind of overpower the industry and have all the technology. Those guys are still there, but there's so many different microservices that are available to bring value to the shipper community and to the carrier community that I think your carriers do see the necessity and the value creation of the intermediaries there, in terms of shippers have a difficult time keeping up on the changing and the technology, all of the different services that are available out there, and the more that everybody can embrace the process of gaining efficiency and looking less about who's involved and who's my partner, who's my enemy. Look at everybody as a partnership and trying to drive the most value out of the supply chain. And that's where you're going to see your real victories out there.
So, Dave, it wasn't too long ago that we saw the smaller carriers screaming for a floor on rates, right? And then things got really good for them, and there was no talk of trying to cap that, of course, which is human nature, and we saw that quite well. We're going into another season where those smaller carriers are going to get desperate, or possibly get very desperate here, right? If the tumble becomes this bloodbath, which looks like we're heading that way right now. What can we do, and what can they do to kind of avoid that adversarial relationship and come to a positive relationship with the intermediaries and use them to help them to sustain themselves and stay in business?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Those guys are in a tough position. I think Craig's outlined that very well on his last couple couple of articles out there, whether it's fuel, whether it's insurance requirements. There's a lot of things, and the cost of trucks being significantly more than it was a couple of years ago. The smaller carriers haven't invested a ton of money, and they could end up in a upside down position very soon. Sure. Look, I think they have to get out of the load by load mentality, which potentially has made them a ton of money over the last couple of years, and look at it more on a contractual basis. You know, they've all had opportunities to build relationships with brokers, with 3PLs, and with shippers. I think they need to go back and review their last several years worth of opportunities to figure out what relationships are they able to build on, and they should really look at now as a great opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Instead of trying to spread myself very thin and work across the nation all over the place, let's focus on what we've done well, develop on the carrier or the shipper and 3PL relationships that we've built on, and see where they can go from there. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a people's business, and I think that those who are able to leverage those relationships and to build on those relationships are going to be the winners.
What a good segment to end on, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Great to have you guys from ODW as always, and we'll talk to you next month.
Good stuff, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.